Hello, everybody.
No, wait, oh wait, yeah, we're not muted.
Yeah, we're not muted this time.
Whoa!
Who would have thought we broke the cycle. We've risen above. Welcome to DnDTime Talks. I, as always, am Pete.
And I, as always, am Jeremy. I always want to do more with that, and I never do.
Yeah, I mean, I can never think of like a good moniker to put in front of my name. But
interesting, Pete. You're frozen in a comical manner.
Oh, that's what I wanted to be. Actually, I picked that pose specifically. I wanted to time it, so I got a nice one. Am my audio coming through?
Yeah, your audio like berserked for a second, but
oh well, if we have
the appropriate. Yeah, Pete's got a 2 FPS.
I made a PowerPoint presentation today of my face.
Pete has returned. I brought him back.
Excellent. So Jeremy.
It's the Cleric Day, guys.
I'm very excited about Cleric Day, Jeremy. Are you?
I am super hyped. I am a Cleric boy myself.
Absolutely. Today's topic is the Cleric. For the next hour, we're going to be talking about the Cleric. We're going to be talking about all of their kind of abilities, how to kind of role play it, and what kind of role play opportunities they offer. Going through really focusing on a lot of the spells. Probably won't go too deep in on those divine domains because there are a ton of them. But we'll be going through level 7 as we have in the other class breakdowns. So should be pretty fun. We'll be hopping in just a second.
Yeah, Pete, you're having a little bit of staticky talking every once in a while. I think your internet is not cooperating at the moment.
Do you think it is a Discord thing? We could fix it by moving to a different Discord
let's try
channel.
The other Discord.
Okay.
No, it's worse.
Okay.
Guys, I have cast Inflict Wounds upon Pete. Okay,
I'm going to move back to the other one.
No, stay here now. I don't want to have to move that again. All right. Well, anywho, without further ado, feel free to join in with this conversation in chat. It should be an exciting one. I'm a very passionate Cleric player myself. I love the Cleric. And yeah, if there's anything you want us to talk about in the future for future topics here in DnDTime Talks, let us know in the chat and on Twitter. So yeah, let's dive into today's topic, Pete. What are we talking about, really? What's the skinny of it?
We're talking about the Cleric, Jeremy. Cleric is... I don't know if I would say that Cleric is one of the most popular. I don't know if, I feel like there's a lot of very, pardon the pun, devoted Cleric players. But it is definitely one of the most iconic classes. It's one of the classes that you really strongly associate with Dungeons and Dragons. Part of the archetypical D&D party. Your fighter, your cleric, your rogue, your wizard, and kind of a lot like the bard in terms of how the cleric plays. The clerics are really fun because they can be built to do anything. That being said, they're usually a little bit more specialized in what they are good at, and will usually be a little bit better at their best thing than a bard would be. And then in terms of the flavor of the class, the cleric are divine casters. The cleric call upon the power of a god that they worship, or some powerful being if you're flavoring things a little bit differently. But they draw all of their magic and their strength from their devotion to their god. It's a huge role-playing space. It's kind of a weird role-playing space because you're confined to this sort of, you draw your power from this greater being, but the being that you draw your power from can be literally any god, which can have any kind of flavor. So it's restrictive, but there's tons of room in that restriction to figure out a way to make the cleric your own.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to what Pete was saying, it being one of the most iconic classes, when you think of Dungeons & Dragons, a whole lot of what originally became Dungeons & Dragons came from popular media, stuff like The Lord of the Rings. And Cleric is of, the fighter, the wizard, the rogue, or the thief as it was called back in. The Cleric is the only one that didn't really exist in that setting. It didn't come from, well, The Lord of the Rings specifically. unlike the rest of them.
Yeah.
Which they're very clear analogs there. So I think it's something that, like Pete was saying, really feels unique and special to D&D. And also, like Pete was saying, the cleric is good at everything. And we're going to dive into that a little later. I'm super excited. But anyway, if you're watching this, you're probably wondering, what do I need to watch this? And the answer is, well, maybe. If you have never played a cleric, if you're interested in playing a cleric and would just kind of like the skinny of what the cleric is great at and how they play, this is the thing for you. If you're looking for like an intense, like, well, actually, you know what? This is just for you if you like clerics. Stay here. That's
learn about clerics. If you don't like clerics, maybe you will by the end of this hour.
Exactly. Now, we're not going to go through all the subclasses like Pete said. We're not going to touch on the Xanathar's Guide to Everything. That'll probably be covered in a later episode. But we will briefly explain the subclasses for the cleric. And if you want to learn about those subclasses, you can always check out your Player's Handbook, which has all that information nice and easily available. There are a ton of subclass options.
Yes, I think it's the widest. Even is it more than Wizard?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so tons of choices. And if you're looking for kind of some points of inspiration, if you want to find some ideas for to like spark a character idea for your cleric, you can look at a lot of kind of real life religions. Generally not modern day religions. Maybe you could do something there, and you'd probably want to talk to your group and make sure that you weren't going to offend anyone with something like that. But I'm talking more about kind of classical religions such as Greek, Roman, and the Norse pantheons. There's tons of stuff you can learn about there, and get sparked with some ideas for how you imagine a cleric won't play. Like, because a lot of the cleric's kits end up making them play a lot like kind of the gods of myth. Like, you can play a Tempest cleric and you're basically just Thor if you want to be.
Or you can play a trickery domain cleric and do some stuff that's kind of like Loki, trickster, goofy, or mischievous kind of thing.
Great comment in chat from Commemorith. If you hate clerics and want them dead, stick around and learn how to kill them. We'll be going over all of the cleric's dark weaknesses here.
And talking, let's start that, Pete. Let's start going over all that. All of their strengths, their weaknesses, all that kind of stuff. What defines a cleric? What is the number one thing about them?
The thing that is, I think, the most iconic part of the cleric's kit are their defensive abilities. Clerics' spells and the kind of proficiencies and equipment that they get, all of them give options to protect themselves and others. We'll get into all of the other things that you can do with a cleric, but that is definitely the archetypal role that they fall into. Defensive spells, healing magic, things along those lines. For starters, like I said, you get some proficiencies, you get armor proficiencies. So at bare minimum, you get medium armor. So you're going to start off with a reasonable armor class. If you're building a cleric, the thing that you're going to be taking, their cleric's power comes from your devotion to your god, which is represented mechanically through your wisdom. So when you're building a cleric, wisdom's probably going to be your primary stat. After that, it all depends on what you want to do. Constitution is always a strong pick. It'll help you keep up your concentrations on spells, but pretty much anything goes. You can be a strength cleric and beat people down if you want to be a dex cleric. And honestly, a cleric could even use a bow because, different subclasses will provide different proficiencies and options to kind of improve in that regard.
And like Pete was just saying, clerics can basically do anything. Their spell option it provides a powerful option for just about anything you want to do. And as primarily a spell casting class, that is what the cleric is, they're going to be casting a lot of powerful spells, even if you end up choosing to play a more melee-oriented beat-em-up kind of character. But speaking of melee-oriented beat-em-up kind of characters, that's generally not what people recognize clerics as. They recognize them as a healer.
Yes.
The the member of the party who supports through healing or buffing allies or any of those kind of things. And they have some of the best spells for it. And they get those spells really early on. They also have some of the most potent healing magic in the game. I'm certain, there's some multi-class option that's more effective.
Yeah, you can work the system.
I know there is weird Goodberry, whatever. But for the most part, they're pretty much the most potent healer class in the game, just out of the box, and they're really effective, basically, at healing and supporting the party.
Which I think that is something about the cleric that we hope to debunk tonight, is that the clerics are the best at that. But I think a lot of people at the table, if you bring a cleric and you're not healing all the time, people at that table are like, how come you're not healing? That's your job. 5th edition, I think, does the best job, and I'm not as fluent in previous editions as I think Jeremy is, but I think 5th edition does an amazing job of allowing clerics to kind of do some minor healing while also still functioning and feeling fun to play in their own right. They have powerful damaging spells, huge crowd control effects that they use, some of the best in the game. So the cleric ain't just for healing no more, even though they are still the best at it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the trend we get here for the cleric is the best. That's it. No, they're just the best. They're the best at whatever you choose to do.
Especially if what you choose to do is fight undead. Clerics also get lots of. We'll go over that when we get to the feature. But clerics are very strong against undead and kind of evil creatures of the night and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. They have a lot of abilities that are specifically toned to start dealing with that. To start dealing with undead monsters. And speaking of dealing with undead monsters, that's probably the direction you want to take your character. You probably want to role play, or maybe you don't, but that's a very common option, is role play this character who's going out to destroy the undead. Your class is super effective at it, so why not roll into that? And I think there are a lot of different ways you can take that as a cleric. And maybe even ignore that if you really want. You can rationalize your feelings with the undead in a different way. Your ability to defeat them is maybe because you're kind of more attuned to them for some reason. And this kind of all ties into the roleplay space that you have as a cleric. And yeah, that kind of all ties into your deity and how you choose to visualize that. It's a restrictive space, but it's a space that you choose the boundaries. You choose the restrictions.
This was an old comment that we missed, but I wanted to point it out just because I thought it was really important. Ravensteel Blacktalon said, the back of the player's handbook has tables upon tables of pantheons, or to talk to your DM about their world because they might have their own pantheon as well. And then Infinite Tacos also said, and if all else fails, make up your own god. So that's definitely something that you should do is talk to your DM about what gods are in the world and kind of work with them to figure out how to work in. Once you're kind of figuring out what it is that you want to do, and you're kind of picking out your god, talk to your DM about what gods you're allowed to pick from, because everyone kind of has their own quirks on that.
And before we go any further, I want to just put this out there because I think this is the most important reason not to play a cleric. Because just because you're playing a religious character does not mean you need to be a cleric. The cleric as a class is designed to buff allies, heal, and they have some damaging options, but they are not the best damaging option. They aren't the best in melee, but they can do it. If you want your character to be, let's say you worship Kasuth, elemental god of flame. Okay, being the cleric class is not the option you want to do. You want to be like a sorcerer that just worships Kasuth. Yeah. And casts fireball. And that's
you can just say
to make, because if you pick a class if you pick the cleric just because your character is religious, you're not gonna necessarily have a good. You know what I mean, Pete?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of the times you can just kind of say, for example, that Kasuth sorcerer, you can just kind of say that my sorcerer powers come from Kosuth. It's that simple. So think about, yeah, Jeremy, I think you summed it up perfect. Think about if you want to do the kit that the cleric does.
Precisely. And, likewise, if you don't want to be a super religious character, maybe you pick the cleric class, but don't go with the god. That's a little more funky. In 5th edition, it's a lot more viable, as you don't pick a god in 5th edition. You pick a divine domain. We'll talk about those briefly. But yeah, you don't pick a god. In previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons, you would say, I am a cleric of Mystra. And because you pick Mystra, the Forgotten Realms god, you would have a special set of abilities. Or I am a cleric of the Raven Queen, or I am a cleric of Paylor. In 5th edition, you say, I am a cleric of life. And that
which I like that a lot more personally.
It really widens the role-playing space a lot. It lets you say, my character just has to care about life and preserving life. They don't necessarily have to be tied to one thing.
And I'm sure I'm just going to say it wrong, but Vassal Zadwe, I've never learned how to pronounce that yet, says you can be a cleric of an abstract concept. Yeah, that is exactly what 5e kind of allows you to do. That's something I think that for all the DnDTime players out there is really popular in DnDTime, which I love. There's so many players that are clerics of the sun, clerics of the cloud, clerics of the earth. They just kind of worship these more ideas than specific gods, which is a cool shift for the cleric's direction.
I'm getting called out in chat, Pete. Deved, you're right. Clerics do the most damage. Level 1 spell, 3d10, unparalleled. The best. Clerics are the best at everything, guys. End of story.
I mean, Guiding Bolt, too.
But anyway, while we're talking about gods, let's talk a little bit about D&D gods, just very briefly. Most worlds that exist in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, whether it be generic fantasy land, where y'all are just adventuring in this fantasy medieval Europe, and it doesn't really matter what's what, or the Forgotten Realms, it's a polytheistic world. There are gods. It's not the kind of place where you can choose not to believe in God. In these settings, gods are a fact of life and exist, usually. Dark Sun. But they tend to be just kind of a fact of life. And so playing a cleric isn't necessarily a particular leap of faith, right? And your character may not be believing in something so much as just being rewarded for their loyalty, what have you.
Mm-hmm. Being rewarded for their worship. And I think you can think of faith in an aspect where gods are real is more just like trust that this god's path is most the right one as well. It's not a question of, do I think that this god exists? It's a question of, is what this god represents as important as having a god to it kind of implies, so to speak. And, I think that also kind of brings us into some great sort of questions that you can start to ask about your character when you're building a cleric. You should start kind of asking yourself why it is that you worship the god that you do. That is the kind of core thing about your character, and that's where you should probably start to really guide and direct your questions. So there's tons of ways that you can do it. Maybe, for example, you were raised among a religious family. Your parents worshipped Paylor, and so now you have kind of inherited that worship of Paylor. And then you can start kind of branching off a character from that, because then there's the question of, because your parents worship this god, have you chosen to believe in Paylor because you truly agree with Paylor's doctrines, or is it just kind of an inherited thing? Is this maybe not even the right faith for you? So you can have some conflict there, and you can start kind of building and fleshing out a character from these kind of simple questions.
Yeah, and actually another great example we had in chat, Raventail Blacktalon, was talking about how she's playing a cleric that didn't know that's where their divine power came from. And
that's rad. That's rad.
It's awesome, and it's totally reasonable. That leaves so much space open for the Dungeon Master to play with. Going back to our last conversation about backstories, that's a really cool move. I'm really excited to see that kind of thing in play. I wish I had thought. I might steal that. Sorry, Raventail. But yeah.
When you see that cleric show up in DnDTime, you will know where it came from.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, as we touched upon earlier, the subclasses are going to have a big impact on flavoring your character. They do give you powerful mechanical abilities as well, but really it's an aesthetic choice, the flavor of who your character is and how you're going to play them. So we'll go through most of these divine domains. We'll touch on them for the most part. We'll at least give a brief explanation. But because there are so many, we won't be able to go through all of them. So, let's start.
Want to start diving into the mechanics here. So divine domain is the most important choice that you're going to make, and the reason for that isn't necessarily because of the impact of mechanics. It's because I think it's actually the only choice. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the only choice in the cleric progression. Is the initial choice of divine domain. Other than like skills and equipment. Yeah. So definitely think carefully about what domain you want, because it's going to have repercussions throughout the rest of the game. You'll be getting new spells. You'll be getting all kinds of new stuff from your domain. So think carefully about that one. So like Jeremy had mentioned before, domains are more kind of these general sort of broad ideas of what a character can be. If you have a god that you've chosen, for example, that you don't think fits into one of these domains perfectly, you can just kind of, you can pick one that's close, and the fact that it's this broad domain will allow you to kind of, approximate what the exact worship or the exact powers that you would expect your god to bestow upon you to be. So let's run through a few of these. The player's handbook ones, at least. We won't do.
You want to go back and forth, Pete?
Yeah, sure. I want to take the first one, Jeremy.
Knowledge. Knowledge is one of the domains that you can choose. Generally speaking, it represents a love for knowledge. In the Forgotten Realms, maybe that would be the god Agma, or maybe Savras. But generally, in other settings, it could be anything. And generally speaking, you worship a god that prizes knowledge. In an abstract sense, maybe you worship knowledge itself as an idea in your. It all kind of depends on the setting. Your spells and the different abilities you get are all going to involve the acquisition and practical application of knowledge.
Yes.
And I say practical application because that's really important. That's what really makes this divine domain stand out a little bit. It's got a lot of cool ways of becoming temporarily proficient in something, in a skill. So maybe that would be like blacksmithing, because you pray to your god for the knowledge of blacksmithing or something like that. And yeah, it's cool. It allows you to be a lot more versatile than a lot of the other cleric options might. Next, we got light.
Yeah, the light domain, you worship a god of light. Oftentimes it will be sort of a god of the sun, or I think light and knowledge are kind of similar in that I think there's an association with light gods of kind of dispelling evil, revealing truth to a degree, I think is associated, purifying. Pelor is, I think, the archetypical god of the sun. He's the most iconic of them. Jeremy, if you have a couple other light gods you could rattle off, I don't know them, I think, quite as well as you.
Yeah, a Monitor, otherwise known as Lathander, kind of one and the same a little bit, different aspects, whatever, are other classic Forgotten Realms gods of light. Generally speaking, it's the light and the darkness, whether it be Lathander, a new start, or a Monitor being purifying justice, kind of.
Yes, and
also
in terms of kind of how the light cleric plays, the spells and the kind of kit that you get give you a lot of things that work very literally with light. You get abilities that allow you to like flash light at enemies that may be, sensitive to it, or to like blind someone that's attacking you to chance dodge it, and you get a lot of spells that just deal sort of radiant or fire damage. So purifying, burning away your foes. It's sort of a combat centric kit with their focus being on fire and radiant damage.
Yeah, absolutely true. I love Adrian P in chat. The hashtag burn everything domain.
That is pretty much it.
Next, we have nature. Quite the opposite of burn everything. Nature, classic deities might be Miliki, or I mean, you could even go with like Malar and the Hunt. But generally speaking, you get more druidic kind of abilities. And in your world, this could be anything ranging from literally worshiping just nature as an abstract concept to a specific god. Generally speaking, you're going to pick either a gentle or violent nature with your character here. Maybe you might pick like the storm is another aspect of nature, but that really fits under a different divine domain.
Yeah, I mean...
So nature's a little funky. Of all of the divine domains in the player's handbook, it's the one that is probably the most difficult to use and to play a lot. So
hashtag Druid wannabe from Adrian P. That's another great summary of.
Yeah, I've often found myself in that position where I want to play a nature cleric, and I just think, well, why wouldn't I be this instead? Why wouldn't I be a druid? And
it's because someone in your party already picked druid.
No, there are reasons to be a nature cleric, but they aren't something that Pete and I can summarize in 2 sentences here.
Indeed.
Next we got Tempest.
Tempest is nature adjacent. It's specifically you're worshiping a god of like thunder, a Thor, or some kind of weather related god. Perhaps you worship some kind of great big cloud in the sky, and that is the force from which you draw your abilities. Regardless of what they are, similar to the light domain a bit, but rather than a focus on fire and radiant, it is more of a focus on thunder and lightning. It is probably it's probably a pretty wrathful cleric a lot. I think it's rare that you see a Tempest cleric that, just because usually the weather that people worship with Tempest clerics tends to be extreme weather, so usually they're pretty kind of, burn the wicked sort of purifying storm and rains kind of clerics. What are some good Tempest gods? Jeremy, can you hit me with a couple?
Yeah, like Tempest is Tempest is more like justice and war. I mean, there are plenty of
I'm sure
storm gods, but
check them out.
What I was going to say is Tempest can also represent water. If your cleric is going to have a strong connection with the sea, Tempest is pretty much the only option of these for you to jump for, and it's a very good one. A maelstrom, perhaps a magic conch.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't say the conch. How could I not do that?
Could very easily be representative as a Tempest cleric. But jumping into trickery. Trickery is an awesome domain. We got Loki, a classic a god from classical literature and classical history.
It's like dead on Loki, the trickery domain is.
Yeah, and in the Forgotten Realms, gods like Mask could very easily be represented. Cleric are also
great one.
Powerful options for the trickery domain. Trickery is really cool. Trickery is the only cleric class that really gives you a strong couple choices for illusions and tricks. It gives you a wide range of what we call utility abilities that you can use in interesting and unexpected ways. Creative, yeah, exactly. You could be a harmless prankster with them. Jester from Critical Role is a trickery cleric. If you want a great example of a chaotic neutral trickery cleric, watch that. Watch the new season of Crit Role and pay attention to her.
Yeah, you can also take more of like kind of a schemy manipulator kind of role with a trickery cleric, or you just want to tear down authority. You're just like a force of chaos in the world. So I think I don't know, it's really cool. I really love the trickery domain. Next time I make a cleric, it will almost undoubtedly be a trickery cleric.
And if you really want to challenge yourself and make a memorable character, go for a trickery cleric that focuses on order and law. Be a lawful trickery cleric and really make your life hard.
I'd have to think about that personally. I don't know how
it would be
one would
real
do that.
Cool somehow. I don't know. Last but not least,
the War Cleric. I love this cleric a lot also. I've spent a lot of time on War Cleric. I highly recommend them if you're levels 1 to 3. But basically, the War Cleric, it plays a lot like kind of a bruiser, but the idea is you worship a god of war, a god of battle. It is a very, perhaps like a god of tyranny even. I feel like War Clerics have a tendency towards the lawful side, but I mean, you can do anything really with it. But a lot of their kits, they get a lot of proficiencies that allow them to wear heavy armor, to wield martial weapons, and you get abilities that allow you to cast spells, but also like take attacks as bonus actions. So you're more of a get in the paint and mix it up kind of cleric. I really like the War Cleric a lot.
Yeah, the War Cleric is awesome. Like I was saying before, God of War, Tempest in the Forgotten Realms, or any number of other things. Like Pete was saying, I mean, you could even worship like a devil. You could worship Asmodeus and be this force of war, and that would be fine. Yes, there is a warlock option for a pact with the devil. That doesn't mean you can't worship a devil, especially one that is a god. But anyway, we jumped to the last domain. I was wrong. War wasn't last. We saved probably the most standard for last.
I saved the regular cleric because I figured we could just talk about the actual abilities on this one.
And that is the life domain. That is, I heal people, the most kind of quintessential of clerics. And one thing you're going to notice is about half of these cleric domains are going to be ones that encourage you to get up in melee, and the other half are going to be ones that encourage you to maybe stay toward the back of your party and lead through support. So life is one of the ones that wants you to get up in melee, and it gives you heavy armor proficiency. Wow, that's good, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's good. It's good. You can now wear those. You can now get that plate armor, combined with other tools in the cleric's kits. You will get unbelievable AC as a cleric.
At level 1, you start with chainmail and a shield. That's 18 armor class at level 1.
Yep.
It's outrageously high. It might be the highest you can get outside of really good rolls and unarmored defense on like something.
Or defense fighting style. But then you get Shield of Faith anyway. So cleric domains give out spells, and you get spells that are things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do as a cleric, that kind of allow you to kind of show off some of the broader scope of what your domain is. For the life domain, it's so much in the cleric's wheelhouse. All of the spells that they get are already cleric spells. However, you now basically always have these spells prepared, so you can always cast them. We'll talk a little bit more about what preparing spells is if you don't know when we get to it, but you get the Cure Wounds and Bless spells starting at level 1 for the life domain cleric.
Yeah, and both of those are really potent abilities.
They're very good.
Wounds is the pretty much biggest bang for your buck heal you get up until level 6, I think. Maybe level 5 if you count Mass Cure Wounds, but it's just the I heal the most. Oh, wait, there's a level 3 one. Whatever. It's a very good healing spell. Very standard. And Bless is the best way to support your party. You just make everyone better at everything they're trying to do. So, let's move on to their Disciple of Life ability. All cleric domains get a special ability, right? So the knowledge domain gets to learn proficiencies like we mentioned. Well, the life domain gets an ability called Disciple of Life. And what that says is whenever you heal people, you heal people more, basically. It increases the amount of healing that they get based on the spell's level, basically.
All of these abilities that are the kind of comparable abilities in the other domains, I think they all feel really good. It's just you have a new tool, it just improves the way that you work, and it makes you feel more like you are what your identity is. So, and I just like all of these.
Yeah, clerics specialize, and they get very good at the thing that they decide to do. So if you want to be really good at something, be a cleric.
Yes.
Which, speaking of that, how do they be really good at it? It's
spellcasting.
So, Pete, let's jump right into their spells. I think before we talk even about cantrips, let's talk about preparing spells, because that's a very important aspect, I think, of the cleric versus maybe other spellcasters in the game. So at every level, you get a big list of spells, and most spellcasters get to choose from that list and say, all right, I know a couple of spells, and then they pick from those couple of spells they know and prepare which spells they want every day. It's a little bit too complicated for us to talk too much about here, but you read it over once or twice.
It's understandable,
and it's
really easy. You just have to read it.
The cleric's different. A cleric automatically knows every cleric spell that it can cast.
Amazing.
So if you can cast a level 1 spell, you know every level 1 cleric spell. And then in the morning, at the beginning of your adventuring day, you prepare a certain number of them based on your cleric level and some others. So that's a really big thing right there, because it means you make your choice at level 1 for your cleric domain, and from then on out, there are no permanent decisions you're going to make as a cleric. If you're using a set of spells one day and you decide, I don't like these spells, you can prepare different spells for the next day and play completely differently than you did before.
Along the same vein, you can take a look at what obstacles you're going to be facing and decide, these are the things that I want to use for this situation. We're going to be going into the Kraken's lair. You think to yourself, oh, the Kraken is probably going to wrap its tendrils around us and pull us in. I want to have freedom of movement so my allies are able to move without being restrained throughout there. So preparing spells is really fun. I like it a lot, and it adds a ton of power that I think is underestimated a bit when you look at the Cleric's Kit.
However, you can also go through the entire game by just picking a set of spells that you know and just never changing them.
This is true.
A lot of people do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Is it the most optimal? No. But you can do that and still be completely effective.
I did that for a long time.
A set gameplay that's because you didn't know. But
yep.
It's a different story. Another cool ability that clerics have is something called ritual casting. Cleric ritual casting is interesting because it works a little different than like the wizard's ritual casting.
Not quite as good as the wizard's, yeah.
Basically, if a cleric has prepared a spell, note that they have to have prepared the spell. They can spend 10 extra minutes if the spell is a ritual spell, and they can cast a spell without using one of their spell slots. This is a really good way of allowing you to use some interesting, cool spells outside of combat. You'll never use ritual casting in combat. Never with an asterisk, but you'll basically never use ritual casting in combat.
That would be a crazy fight where you needed to cast a ritual. I'm very into that scenario where that happens. So tell me about it if that happens to you.
Yeah, tell us if that happens. But there's basically no way you're ever going to use this in combat, but it's a cool way to let you cast more spells outside of combat without having to use up your spells for later on. Common ritual spells include Detect Magic. Pete, what are some other good ritual spells?
The other ones that clerics get, at least at the beginning, they get Detect Poison and Disease, they get Purify Food and Drink. Later on, they get a lot of ones that involve divination and communication with their god, which that kind of suite of spells are my literal favorite spells in the game. Because they are rituals, that's why I like them so much, because you just get a lot of really flavorful and interesting things that you can do just for free. It just becomes part of your kit. And I think we'll talk about some of those a little bit more as we get to them, as we're kind of moving through the level progressions. But.
Yeah. So let's briefly talk about some of these special cleric cantrips. At level 1, you get to pick 3 cantrips, and there are a suite of cantrips you have to choose from, a whole bunch. But not actually a ton for the cleric. Well, there are a bunch that are very specific to the cleric that are kind of special.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
And they're really cool. Guidance is one option. Guidance is a often underlooked spell, which allows you to basically call upon your god's guidance to give you or one of your allies a bonus to the next ability check that they make. This can be very helpful in a lot of circumstances. If you know you're about to go into a combat, you can use it to give yourself an extra D4 to your initiative roll. Little do you know, a lot of people don't know that initiative is a skill check.
Next thing you got is
cool outside of combat.
Yeah, there's lots of little stuff you could do with guidance. Also, I like just the flavor of guidance. I just picture the cleric going over and being like, hey, You're gonna do great on the next one. I just like the tiny little words of like encouragement, or just like
Emotional support.
yeah, just lending that emotional support. Um, Next, you got the light cantrip. It's very iconic and simple. Basically, you touch something and it lights up. It's really fun. There's lots of creative things you can do with it. Like, for example, lighting up an arrow and then having your ranger, your gnome ranger, fire it. Or just the more traditional use, you just touch your shield and now you have a torch and you can see if it's dark if you don't already have dark vision. So simple spell, but it can be really fun and you can use it creatively.
Yeah, and next we have Mending. You just fix broken stuff. That's cool. The next spell is Resistance. It's another cantrip. Resistance is not that great. It's infrequently used. It helps people on their saving throws. It can be useful. It does have it, especially against traps that you know are there but can't really deal with. But yeah, Sacred Flame is the next cantrip, which is a basic combat cantrip. It has some cool nuances to it in that it ignores cover. But,
which is rad. It's also the only damaging cantrip that the clerics has access to. So,
well, yes, in the player's handbook, that's true.
Yeah.
Next, there's Spare the Dying, which is an awesome cantrip. As our pal Macabre Derek in the chat always likes to say, maintain the suffering.
Yes.
Spare the Dying is a cool ability that lets you keep your allies from dying without having to make any rolls. It doesn't heal them, but it keeps them from bleeding out once they're unconscious. Very good ability to have if your allies are unconscious and you're out of spells. And last, there's Thaumaturgy, which is kind of like the Cleric's Prestidigitation, which if you don't know what Prestidigitation is, this isn't helpful for you. But Thaumaturgy lets you do a whole wide range of minor miracles. Whether it be earth tremors, booming voices,
open and slam shut a door, lots of little stuff. It's fun. It feels cool. Just a lot of flavor in that spell.
Yeah, and the thing about cantrips, so you get to pick from 3 of those, and cantrips can always be used. If you're not familiar with spellcasting, you always have your cantrips available, and you never run out of uses of them. So these are all just great abilities that you're going to have, and they can help to define how your character. That's a great point, Infinite Tacos. Thaumaturgy is almost always used to make fart noises, though. Never mind. I am mistaken.
Just as prestidigitation is always used to make fart smells, like 100% of the time.
So, without further ado, we should really start going through these spells.
Yeah, we're going to run out of time real quick.
I think we'll be fine. I
don't think we have to...
Mostly defined by their cool spells. So let's quickly hit these, Pete. Want me to?
Let's back and forth. You go first.
Cool. Well. Yeah,
or do you want to just go through the full list?
The ones that we've really called out.
Yeah.
So there are a whole bunch of cleric-only spells, but there are a few that really stand out. Like I said earlier, the clerics are the best in that their spell options are the best spell options for their level at low level. First, we have Command. Command is got a bit of length to the spell option, but basically it's you command someone to do something. You get one word, like grovel or halt,
drop the weapon that they're holding,
dance. Like you can pick whatever you want as the word. They provide a lot of examples in the spell description, and that enemy has to spend their entire next turn doing it. It's a very powerful control ability in combat.
And it's fun, and it allows you to really come up with some cool ways to use that spell, unique, make it special to your character.
Yeah, crawl, grovel, 2 other great ones, Macabre Derek and chat. And yeah, Command is it's one of the best level 1 spells in the game. It feels awesome, it's super impactful. And it scales up really well when you cast it at higher level. So let's talk about the next spell, Guiding Bolt.
We got Guiding Bolt. Guiding Bolt is a fairly simple spell. It's an attack roll. You shoot out a beam of light, or whatever your kind of magical power manifests as, and it strikes the target. It does a ton of damage, 46 damage, which is a lot for a level 1 spell. In addition, it basically puts magic highlighter on your enemy, and now your allies' next attack on them. Their allies' next attack on them has advantage. So it's both kind of a buff for your allies, and it just does a ton of damage in its own right. Awesome spell, very powerful. Cleric, unique, barring, I think, some other subclasses, and like Bard can get it anything, but you know.
And actually, we just got a great comment in chat I can't miss. You use thaumaturgy to make fart sounds. You use command to make them fart. But yeah, Guiding Bolt is a super impactful attack spell. Really good. You feel like a power when you're casting Guiding Bolt. And that
for sure.
The next spell is the best spell in the game. I don't care what any of you in chat have. I'm looking at you, chat. I don't care what you have to say about this. Healing Word is the best spell in the game. It is a healing spell. It uses a bonus action, so it means you can still do things. You can still fight while healing your allies. You don't have to just give up your turn to be the healer that people want you to be.
It's basically the so healing good. Word. The text should be healing word. You can still have fun playing D&D. It's just like you get to have fun if you have healing word, because people will not be at your throats to heal.
Exactly. I mean, healing word just the best. Next,
we
have
a lot of health.
A very peculiar spell. Well, actually, if you're the life domain cleric, healing word super good. But,
well, yeah, for sure.
Next, we have a very interesting spell, Pete. If you want to dive into Sanctuary.
Yeah, I'll take Sanctuary. Basically what it does, it's wordy, but you can put a ward on an ally, and enemies will have to attempt to make a wisdom saving throw, or they'll just won't want to attack them. They'll attack someone else instead. It's interesting. I like it because it does not require concentration. That is kind of the best thing about Sanctuary, in my opinion. And it's also a bonus action. So like Healing Word, you can offer this protection to someone and then continue to act and do other interesting things in combat. It does have the kind of caveat that makes it a little bit less powerful, that when you use it, if that player who Sanctuary makes an attack or uses some kind of offensive technique, then that ends the effect of the Sanctuary. But if you cast it on yourself and then you got a lot of healing that you're interested in doing, if you're that life cleric, you'll be protected for a while and you don't have to concentrate it. You can get your bless up and do other things like that. So it's a cool spell.
It also provides a really awesome roleplay environment too. We have Reflected Tenate in chat. You wouldn't hit a Man of the Cloth. I mean, that's just
rad.
Super cool.
That's rad.
You walk right up to the boss, you're sanctuaried, and they can't attack you.
And they're just like, no, I wouldn't.
Also great for protecting your allies if they're particularly wounded, or if they're down and the enemy's trying to death blow them.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big deal for it.
Excellent ability. The next one is Shield of Faith, another excellent ability. This one is a lot more combat-centric. Also a bonus action. Notice the trend of Healing Word, Sanctuary, Shield of Faith. Incredible spells, bonus action. Those do not take away from your normal turn of, I hit these guys. I use an attack. These are things you do in addition, which is just an awesome design. It feels really good to play. Shield of Faith just gives an ally or yourself bonus to armor class. That's all. It's super straightforward. It could be a divine halo protecting you. It could be whatever you decide it is.
If you're that life cleric with your 18 AC, you now have a 20 AC, and at low levels, you are nigh untouchable.
Oh, yeah, we have Adrian P in chat. The Sanctuary, grapple, shove, prone. You got to grapple them and shove them prone before you Sanctuary, technically, Adrian, because prone and grapple actions are attacks. But anyway, a couple more interesting things, rituals we're going to mention.
We touched on the rituals before. The cleric rituals are detect magic, detect poison and disease, and purify food and drink at low levels. They all kind of basically do the exact thing. They tell you what they do in the name. The one that you'll probably see the most use out of on the reg is detect magic. But the other ones, like if you're in a niche situation where you think you're going to need them, just prepare them. And now you got an option that you can use without spending a spell slot if you want to take a little extra time. So it feels good. But what detect magic does is it allows you to sense magic around you. And it tells you the type of magic, so you can learn a little bit about your environment. You can pick up traps, and once you've cast it, it lasts on you for a while. So like you can detect magic before you begin your dungeon crawl, like outside of the door of the dungeon, and then go in as I think one of the most classic ritual detect magic casts.
Yeah, or you're going to make camp and you're in a graveyard, you detect magic, and oh dang, there's powerful necromancy in all these graves around us. Let's not be here. And you don't get ambushed in the night. And purify food and drink is another ritual that can be a super cool like role-playing option, even if it's not mechanically impactful a lot of the time. It is in hex crawl adventures like Tomb of Annihilation, but in regular role play, it can just be a kind of thing where every night that's what your cleric does. They sit down and they bless the meal, and that's what that is representative of, and that can be really cool from that a flavor perspective. That's all level 1. We just finished talking about level 1.
Oh my god. All right.
That's how crazy clerics are.
Cleric's got a lot of stuff.
Cleric level 2 now, and you'll see as things go up, we're going to talk less and less about each level because there's less to talk about. It's hard to beat that level 1.
You get another first level spell slot at level 2, and then the real thing that you get at level 2 is Channel Divinity. Channel Divinity is, on the whole, it is a very powerful ability that you can use one time per short rest. You get more uses of it as you level up, but at level 2 you can use it one time per short rest. And there are a couple different effects. You get one effect that all clerics get, which I'll talk about now, and that is Turn Undead. We'd mentioned that clerics have the abilities that are powerful against undead. Turn Undead Channel Divinity is kind of the quintessential cleric move. It's like you hold up your holy symbol, there's a flash of light, and any undead within a certain distance of you have to flee from you in fear. It's fairly powerful, especially, it's very fringe in its usage, but in that situation where there's lots of undead, it feels good, and it obviously is very good.
Yeah, and in addition to that, all clerics get a domain Channel Divinity, a special Channel Divinity they can use instead of Turn Undead that has to do with their domain. These Channel Divinities refresh after a long rest, and generally speaking, they're going to be like Turn Undead. You use it once, it does something big and impactful. As you level up, you'll get more Channel Divinities, but I think it never gets higher than 3 per.
Channel Divinity is actually short rest. I looked that one up.
Oh, well, my mistake.
Yeah, very good.
And before I go too long, I am getting called out in chat. We missed the most damaging level 1 spell, Inflict Wounds. Which
Inflict Wounds.
Sick. You touch someone and they die. It's just sick.
Yeah.
It's the touch of
good.
death.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Very powerful other option. That's all you get at level 2. You get your Channel Divinity, basically. That's about it. And
the ones that you get for the domains are cool. They're a lot more useful overall than the Turn Undead one. The Turn Undead has that fringe case. The one that you get from your class is going to be always very good.
Yeah. Level 3. What do you get at level 3? Well, you get now 4 level 1 spell slots and 2 level 2. Holy crap, your spell casting just went way through the roof.
The caster spike. That's the best feeling spike, I think, in the game, is the caster 2 to 3.
Yep. You are suddenly now a master of magic. You can cast all sorts of stuff. Clerics get a lot of great spells. They get Aid, Augury, Blindness/Deafness, Calm Emotions, Continual. I can list them all, but it's not important. There are a few that are super impactful and super cool that are not necessarily just cleric spells, but you mostly see them on clerics. One of them is, and this is not one of the ones Pete listed, it's Blindness/Deafness. Which allows you to blind or deafen enemies. Super cool. And the big thing about it is it's not a concentration ability. It's something that
I didn't even know that. Once
you do it to an enemy, they are blind or deaf until they save. Super impactful. And it does exactly what you think it does. Yeah, Macabre Derek, it's eye gouge. You can flavor it as you gouging their eyes.
Poke them right in the eye.
Yeah, right? Or maybe you're a trickster cleric, and that's what you poke them in the eye.
Another great spell, if you're into that more kind of support role, is Enhanceability. Clerics don't get...
opposite of blindness, deafness.
Yes, you get better eyes. It's one of those spells that you're not going to use that probably a lot of in combat, but it's your out-of-combat bread and butter. You can give basically any creature or any ally advantage on ability checks of a certain nature. Usually comes with a small extra buff that isn't super relevant often, but you'll use that spell a ton on days when you're not fighting.
Yeah, it's a really great spell, especially if you know that your party is going to spend some downtime in a city and might not be doing a lot of combat that day, great ability to cast to haggle with bar.
A lot of that Eagle Splendor talking to all the local merchants.
Gonna briefly mention Gentle Repose. Gentle Repose is a cleric spell. I believe the wizard can also cast it. Basically,
ritual.
It's a ritual. And when you cast that spell, you now have an extra 10 days to resurrect a fallen ally once they're dead. This isn't super impactful, but it goes really well with the level 3 cleric spell, which is called Revivify, and we'll talk about that at level 3.
Yeah.
Other great spells to pick at level 3.
Hold person.
Level 3 spells, but the cleric level 3 is different. Other great ones, Hold Person. You paralyze someone with your words. Really cool. And Spiritual Weapon.
Spiritual Weapon is the big one.
If you want to beat the absolute crap out of someone, Spiritual Weapon's a great way to do it. Not concentration. Super important.
Not concentration.
So good. And bonus action. This strikes both of the signs of potentially being an awesome spell. And then, what it actually does, you summon a spiritual weapon, which beats the living.
That can be anything that you want it to be. You get to pick what your spiritual weapon is, so it also has a ton of flavor. Your spiritual weapon, you can beat people down with a giant shoe if you so choose.
Maybe you're a cobbler.
And it does radiant damage. It also does radiant damage, which is that spell is so good. It's amazing. I can't praise spiritual weapon enough. The rituals that you get at this level this is my favorite spell in the game, which is Augury. Basically, as a ritual, you can kind of commune with your god. You roll the bones, you roll the dice, and you kind of read the signs to get some kind of omen about what your next planned course of action is. And the thing I love about this spell, like I said, because it's a ritual, you can do it for free if you have it prepared. And then there's a ton of flavor that this allows a DM to add so much flavor to your character, like describing what the nature of the omen that you receive is. Additionally, if you use it too much, your god gets annoyed with you and starts like messing with you on your answers. I could talk about how much I like the spell and what you could do with it all day, but it's cool, and I recommend people, taking a hard look at Augury and preparing it every now and again.
And actually, we have a correction, Pete. You were wrong. It's not radiant damage. Spiritual.
It's force. It's force damage. It's even better.
So moving on, level 4. Level 4 is super simple. You get an ability score increase. You usually are going to just increase your wisdom because everything you do uses your wisdom. Your healing uses your wisdom. Your spells use your wisdom, and you're a spellcaster, so increase your wisdom seriously. Yep. Unless your wisdom's already a 20 for some reason. You also are going to get second level spells, or more of them, so you cast more spells.
One more.
Whatever. It's good.
Level 5. That's quick. See, now we're moving quick.
Yeah, exactly. Level 5, you upgrade your turn undead to destroy undead. If the undead are like weak enough, like skeletons or basic zombies, you can just kill them instead of sending them away. You disintegrate them to dust. Feels badass as all hell.
Yeah, it feels so cool when you kill 1,000 skeletons with one move instantly. Oh, it's so good. Like, if you're a DM, this is a shout out to DMs. Give your clerics a chance to kill a bunch of weak undead every now and again. Just be nice to them, because I think a lot of people think to themselves, oh, why even bother putting these things at your players? They're not even a challenge. Just give them some undead to blow up every once in a while, because it's amazing.
And then once they've used Destroy Undead, send a Banshee at them. Anyway.
There you go.
Sorry, bad Dungeon Master talking. There are a whole bunch of really cool spells. Level 5 is a huge power spike for all casters, is they get level 3 spells. Pete, you want to hit a couple?
Yeah, I'll do Dispel Magic first. Awesome spell. Tons of utility. You will, if you have this spell prepared, you will constantly be surprised at how often you want to use it. Whether it be a buffed ally, or like a charmed ally or a buffed enemy, or you just need to like break into a magic lock, you will be dispelling magic all the time. Another one, Revivify. Clerics are the only class to get true and proper resurrection, I think, save druids at level 9, which is weird, but Revivify is the base level resurrection spell. If your ally dies in combat, you can bring them up if it's very shortly after. Is it a minute?
Yep. 1 minute.
there is a pretty large barrier of entry on Revivify, in that you need 300 gold pieces worth of diamonds and material components in order to cast the spell. Think about that when you're preparing Revivify. Know that you need that. Talk to your DM about components, but that's what this is.
Interesting thing about what Pete was saying about Revivify, that's where the level 2 spell, Gentle Repose, becomes really good. Gentle Repose makes that 1 minute into 10 days, which gives your party time to figure out how we're going to get 300 gold pieces of diamonds, and then your lawful good party robs the bank and kills some people for their diamonds, and and
now there's an Oathbreaker Paladin. And
yeah, there are some other great spells at level 3. A couple. Beacon of Hope makes your healing way better. Mass Healing Word allows you to heal people en masse with just a word. Like regular healing word, a bonus action, and it heals a lot more people.
Speak with is cool. I like
Speak with Dead. Pete, you're botting out real bad, so I'm going to take this one. Speak with Dead is another really cool out of combat ability. It allows you to, once you found a dead creature, to speak with it, asking some basic kind of questions. It's really neat. It can give you kind of cryptic answers, and the creature doesn't necessarily have to tell you the truth. That's a caveat of the ability. So realize if you try and speak with Dead, it might lie to you if you killed it. But it's really cool if like you're exploring a murder mystery. Like, yes, you're back.
Rituals. They get Feign Death, Meld into Stone, Water Walk. All cool.
Those are niche.
Yeah, stuff you can do with them. One of my days, I've seen Jeremy Feign Death so many times. It's the goofiest spell. Ask him about that some other time. Domain, level 6. Moving on.
Feature.
And you get a second channel divinity usage, which is a pretty big deal too.
Yep.
Most of these are actually pretty minor features. Like some of them give you just a different option for your channel divinity. The light domain, which we've been talking about, gives you you get a little bit of heal back when you give out a heal. You get 2 plus a spell's level. So for those level 1 healing words that you're doing all the time, you get 3 health for yourself. It's a pretty small buff, but it's a buff.
Pete, we did it again. We missed an awesome spell. Spirit Guardians at level 3.
Yeah, Spirit Guardians is very good.
Yeah, another great spell. Read it.
Yep, Spirit Guardians and Guardian of Faith that you'll get at 7th level here is also kind of the same ilk.
Yeah, and 7th level, that's the key. You're just getting more spells. And this trend is going to continue through the end of the game. There with a few minor exceptions of cool ability. The big spell that you get at 7th level is called Banishment.
Banishment.
It is arguably the most overpowered spell in the game. It's just an enemy is gone, and they
to recite my what I wrote for the show notes on Banishment here was runs absolute train. Banishment is an extremely good spell.
Yeah, there are a bunch more in there. Death Ward, another really popular one, prevent you from dying one time. It's nice. You cast it way ahead of time before a battle, and it's just nice. And then you get another ritual spell called Divination, which does some more things.
It's kind of augury-ish.
Yeah, it does a bunch of stuff. It's a little too detailed to go into much on the stream right now.
And that's it through level 7, which is what our goal was. After level 7, we're not going to go too deep on this. Basically, everything you get from this point on is either new spells. You get some more ability score increases, of course. Your undead keeps being able to, your destroy undead keeps getting to kill tougher and tougher undead. You get 1 more channel divinity at level 17. Your domain will give you another feature that's the high level feature is pretty cool. They'll buff up your attacks a little bit. But you get 1 more good feature. Jeremy, do you want to take it?
We say good feature.
Cool.
You get an ability called Divine Intervention. You get it at 10th level. It allows you to beseech your deity for assistance. It's very vague. It just says your god will help you, pretty much, for all intents and purposes.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, actually, what it says is you can call upon your deity to intervene on your behalf. When it is great. Imploring your deity's aid requires you to use your action to provide the assistance you seek, and roll a percentile dice. If you roll a number equal to or lower than your cleric level, basically a 10% chance, your deity intervenes. The DM chooses the nature of the intervention. The effect of any cleric spell or cleric domain spell could be appropriate. If your deity intervenes, you can't use this feature again for 7 days. Otherwise, you can use it. You can attempt to use it again after you finish a long rest. Basically, it's just your god helps you, and it's cool. It's really neat. DM can do a whole lot of crazy stuff with it.
10% wish is a good way of looking at it, but it's not exactly wish because the scope of it isn't, or I guess it is like wish in that the scope of it can be even beyond what the cleric would normally be, like a domain spell, like it recommends. The DM can just decide, like, technically, your DM can just decide.
Comes down. And
you now have an allied planetar. Like, there's tons of ridiculous stuff that happens. And then, if I may take the capstone.
Please.
I love capstones, and this is the first capstone we get to talk about where they made a good one. And the capstone feature for Cleric is, a little harsh. But the capstone feature for Clerics is your Divine Intervention always works. So cool. Once per day, you essentially get an effect
Once every 7 days.
I'm sorry, you're correct. Once every 7 days, but once per... I feel like the thing is, it feels like once per day at 20th level, because usually if you're 20th level, you're going into just one fight where it matters. But you get to use this spell or this powerful effect 100% chance.
And that's just cool.
It's just...
This is the kind of thing... Divine Intervention is not a great ability. If you're using that 10% chance in combat, you're probably in really, really bad shape.
Yeah.
However, once you get the 100% chance at level 20, you feel so good. And when that 10% chance happens, when all hope is lost, and you call for Divine Intervention and it works.
Oh, it feels so good.
Friends, that is why you play the Cleric. That is why people love Cleric. It's not really, but like it is now.
I think that's an excellent place to wrap up, Jeremy.
I think so. Fuck, man, I love the Cleric.
The Cleric is a fun class. Play it.
My baby. Sorry.
This is no problem. And also, this was a good discussion. Thank you very much, everyone, for hanging out and talking about the Cleric with us.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Thanks, everybody. I'm glad we could all have this great talk here. Next week, we're going to continue. Wait, no. Next week, there'll be no DnDTime Talks.
Oh, yes, that is true.
So keep in mind
the Wednesday after.
Keep in mind next week, no DnDTime Talks and no D&D Time on Friday. Nothing happening next week. But the week after, we're going to continue our discussion with, looking at you, Pete.
Druid. The Druid will be the next class that we discuss. And then after that, we'll probably take another break from our series as we're going through all the class breakdowns. But next time we do DnDTime Talks, it will be Druid class breakdown.
I have a lot of professional experience playing a Druid. Pete, how long have I been playing that Druid now? What?
2.5 or 3.
2.5, 3 years?
Yeah.
Adrian P., if you ever apologize for being talkative again, I don't know. I'll have to
that's it.
Sneeze on you.
You have to find him to sneeze.
That was just the weirdest threat I could come up with, and I kind of got to sneeze a little. But thank you, everyone, for stopping by, for hanging out, for talking with us. All this great stuff this week. Super excited. If you weren't aware, I hope you are, but if you weren't, D&D Time, Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, this Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific, we will be having our Myth
boss battle.
Oh, man.
The big fight.
Be good. We are super stoked for it, and we hope you guys are too.
If you're in chat and involved in that, we're coming at you. We're coming after you on this one. Excited for that. So yep, Friday 9 o'clock. Come hang out. I don't know if Macabre Derek is going to be doing his stream after this or not, but if he is, we will be hosting him, and check it out. He's running through Curse of Strahd.
Yep, I'm pretty certain he is. So yeah, check him out. We will be hosting him here. I'll put a link in the chat once we turn off the stream here. So follow that to his own channel and everything. And have a great night, everybody. I think we'll be starting in about half an hour.
So check him out. Stay tuned. Goodbye.
Bye.
I'm Pete.
And I'm Robot Jeremy.
And this is DnDTime Talks.
I'm a robot. Bye.
All right, goodbye.